Welcome to the History of Retina's Leaders and Legends series. The purpose of these interviews is to capture first-hand stories from individuals with unique retinal insights of historical significance. Through these discussions, we hope to provide a fuller understanding of the evolution of both the science and practice of retina through the lens of those individuals who have actually lived it. It is truly my honor to be joined by one of retina's true statesmen, Charles Patrick Wilkinson, known by most as Pat. Dr. Wilkinson is Chairman Emeritus of Ophthalmology at the Greater Baltimore Medical Center and Professor Emeritus of the Department of Ophthalmology at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Dr. Wilkinson watched the history of retina unfold, working alongside fellow retinal giants including Drs. Norton, Curtin, Gass, Michels, Machemer, and others. Today, he'll recount the early years, the birth of vitreoretinal surgery, and the rapid-fire innovation that followed. You'll be hard put to find a more humble soul, but make no mistake, Pat Wilkinson is a true pillar in retina, a renowned surgeon, clinician, academician, and author who has contributed mightily through his many critical leadership roles in retina. Dr. Wilkinson chaired the FDA Ophthalmic Devices Panel, was director of the American Board of Ophthalmology, president of the American Academy of Ophthalmology, president of the Retina Society, and of the American Ophthalmologic Society. He continues to attend meetings and serves on several editorial boards and remains active in cultivating the next generation of retina specialists through his leadership role in the Ron Michels Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Pat Wilkinson to our Leaders and Legends History of Retina. Well, first, I want to thank you for joining us, Dr. Wilkinson, today. I appreciate that. You've had recent knee surgery and you've had some injuries, so it's really appreciated that you took the time and the effort to be with us. So thank you first to begin.
Well, Tim, thank you. I'm flattered to be included in this group that you're interviewing, and I look forward to our conversation.
Well, you have such an interesting story, and I think that we're looking to share that with everybody. And we've talked a little bit, and I wondered if you could take me back even before you're in college and medical school and tell me what home was like. Your dad, I believe, was a pretty famous Oklahoma football coach. Is that correct?
That's true. We moved to Norman, Oklahoma when I was 6, and he was the assistant coach for 1 year and then became the head coach at the University of Oklahoma, where I think he coached for 17 years. They still hold the record for the longest consecutive wins, 47.
Tell me how we get from that experience into college and medical school for you and medicine.
I went to Stanford, thought I would be an engineer, and I started out in Physics 1 at Stanford and found out that I had not learned what calculus was. I didn't teach calculus at Norman High, but all the pre-engineers were way ahead of me. So I made my first bad grades, and after about a year of this, I decided I'd go into medicine and became a psych major. And then one thing led to another. I did the usual looking at schools only on paper. I didn't travel anywhere, but was accepted at Johns Hopkins, and so I made my way to Baltimore.
And that's a big change, right?
It was an amazing change. I going from Palo Alto to downtown Baltimore was an epic change for me. But I really, as years went by, really appreciate how lucky I've been.
Well, Hopkins tends to keep you once you're there. So you're there. Tell me how we get you from medical school and who's influencing you into ophthalmology.
Ophthalmology just intrigued me. It offered the opportunity to do surgery or not do surgery, and you know the story. But Dr. Momini, who was a chair at Wilmer at the time, was a very famous guy, was very engaging, and it just seemed like a natural fit. So I signed up, and after about a year of residency, the retina field really appealed to me. I was assisting. We assisted the senior faculty and got to see a lot of retinal stuff going on, which was pretty primitive by today's standards. But so I then pursued the retina field, and I was lucky enough to be accepted down at Bascom Palmer for a retina fellowship, and that was easily the best academic year I ever spent. It was just terrific with the faculty there.
So you get to Bascom Palmer almost when vitrectomy is first starting.
Well, it was really in infancy, but Dr. Machemer was starting to do things. I got a good feel for vitreous surgery with Robert. He was a special guy.
Well, that group too was not just Robert, but even your co-fellows, I think. You were right there when the field was beginning.
Right.
So who was with you at the time?
Well, we had two additional fellows. Bob Johnson was one, and a fellow named Ray Records was the other. Ray left after about 2 months to become a chairman in Nebraska, I think, and so Bob and I were left with another big chunk of work to do, which turned out to be another lucky blessing for us, because even though we worked harder, we got to see more and do more, and we were bounced between Don Gass and Ed Norton and Victor Curtin. What a lucky period of time that was, because they all did things a little bit differently, and you could kind of pick and choose what seemed to you to be the best way to go.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because I think many people don't even appreciate how surgically focused Dr. Gass was at that time. So, he was kind of infamous for the fastest buckle at Bascom Palmer when I was there.
Well, you're absolutely right. The race we had as fellows was to beat him to the table and start, marking where the breaks were. But he would just routinely put something around the eye,
right,
drain the fluid, and that was it.
And amazingly successful, though. So, yeah. We were all thinking that every break and drained correctly and the buckle perfect. And he would throw a band around the eye, that little tiny band, and he was in and out.
Yeah, it was amazing.
What, I have a personal love for Victor Curtin, who also is a little well-known in the operating room. What was operating with Victor like?
Well, he was very generous. He actually would let you look at intraocular findings as the case proceeded, but his fame was kicking the wall. When the time was up, you'd hear this banging on the wall, and Victor would let you know that he needed to get back and finish things up. So, but he was a fabulous guy, as you implied. He was a real balance wheel at Bascom Palmer. He held things together, and when I was lucky enough to be president of the academy, he was one of my honored guests, just because my theme was unsung heroes, and he's always been one of my unsung heroes.
Tell me a little bit about how you saw the patient preoperatively, when you did your drawing, what a drawing was. I mean, I have fellows that I don't think I've ever drawn the peripheral retina, ever.
In those days, you had to allot time to draw the retina. It was part of the resident's duty. It's also part of the fellow's duty. And then, of course, the senior faculty member drew the retina too. And I have a fine illustration showing all three drawings were routinely put up in the operating room, and you could see who'd found things that others had not. And there was always a lot of give and take and yucking it up about who was right and who was wrong. But it was a real art that I think is long gone now.
So I love that, you're right in the mix of things at the very start. So can you tell me, I think all of us know a little bit about Robert Machemer, but don't have the opportunity to have been there with him. Can you share a little bit about the Machemer and the gas and the Curtin and the Norton experience? You were with many people that are my heroes.
I didn't get involved with Robert immediately, but it was very evident to me that the chief, Ed Norton, and Victor Curtin and Don Guess all did things very differently from the time you walked in the operating room. And Dr. Norton always seemed to have difficult cases that were almost inevitably re-ops and long and hard. And I would say Victor was the more standard type of sclerobuckler, much more like Bob Welch, really. And he took a look at the retina and decided on a certain type of way to proceed. And we've already talked about Don briefly, throwing the band around quickly and making definitely the fastest buckler of the group. But again, you can take these techniques and the way they approach things, and you can figure out your own best way. And it usually is just a bit of each of them. Robert was a real genuine scientist in addition to being a retinal surgeon, and I never saw him except doing difficult, primitive vitreous surgery. But he was very, very aware of what he was doing, and he really paid attention to how the machines worked, and you can still remember that German accent of stop, trying to do suction with a syringe was really quite difficult when your other hand's holding a contact lens. So,
I mean, you leave Bascom Palmer. Where are you going to go next?
I went to Oklahoma City. Long story there. I grew up in Norman, which is about essentially 20 miles south, and joined two former Wilmer residents, Tom Akers and Tullus Costin, and talk about how lucky I've been. But Dean McGee was a big oil man in Oklahoma and very a fundamental originator in offshore drilling. And so there's a Kerr McGee oil company. And Mr. McGee detachment when I was there interviewing for the job. So I was there literally when Tom and Tullus were fixing Mr. McGee's retinal detachment. He was going to send all of a bunch of money to the Presbyterian Foundation for a hospital, but he instead transferred it to what became the McGee Eye Institute, Dean A. McGee Eye Institute in Oklahoma City.
So you were right there at the start of that also.
Well, I was there, with the founding, with the building, construction, and founding, and I was there 20 years as division chief and all that, and it was a great time, and vitreous surgery evolved nicely. As you know, Robert Machemer developed this VISC, and he would have short courses for his previous fellows so I was in the second cohort of, I think, 10 people. So I got a VISC, but as you know, the VISC didn't work out production-wise. So Connor O'Malley came up with this teeny tiny 3-port entry system, and it was so obvious, a really quantum leap that jumped ahead of the pack very, very quickly.
Yeah, that was an amazing time to think about vitrectomy with a single port, and you're trying to get some light in the field and there's no really good lighting, and you're trying to cut and then somebody's sucking. I don't think our fellows now appreciate at all what that was like.
I happened to see Steve Charles when he had just started using the 3-port system, and I was telling Ron Michels later about this, and I said, I promise you will get into this as soon as you try it. And he tried it and loved it and just almost caressed the instrument, cleaned it himself. And he called me from a trip, and he said, I'm just publishing my first 100 cases and wanted to tell you I am using the device. So it was not there, and then all of a sudden it was there, and everybody used it.
You've had a unique relationship with Ron and with your ties to Hopkins for a long time. Where did that connection start?
Well, it started at Wilmer. Ron was 2 years behind me, but he was a very glib, outspoken guy about a lot of things, very prolific and very articulate, great speaker, and he acquired the nickname the Rookie after being there about 2 weeks because he was famously in grade school. I think he told his mother that he was going to go to school to learn to read and write, but he knew everything else.
I love that.
And true story, but he was a dear friend, and he really generated so much literature, such a short time, and a lot of fundamental things. And he and I and Tom Rice wrote a book on retinal detachment that has a lot of really basic stuff that's hard to report. Excuse me?
The book. Going back a little bit, I don't, D. McGee has really been a powerhouse going forward since it started with you, and then develops into, and I think of it as a retina specialty group, and David Park coming out of there also. You've had some really remarkable people. How do you get from there back into Baltimore? What pulls you?
Well, there's some social issues, and divorce figured into that. David Park had been selected as the new chair, which was great. David was a good friend of mine. I met him when he was a resident, and we've been good friends ever since. And then the widow Michels was bouncing around in Baltimore. So Alice and I were well acquainted, and we started dating. And then some headhunter found me out of the blue for Greater Baltimore Medical Center, which had been chaired by Bob Welch, who is another retina guy who was at Wilmer and one of my mentors. And so I wanted to get out of Oklahoma City, and this new opportunity with a new department and a new love of my life and all of that. Go. So that's where I went, on to Baltimore.
On to Baltimore. And GBMC, under your direction, you did remarkable things there.
Well, I think we did very well. We it wasn't your typical full-time practice for everybody, but we covered all the bases with our private staff, and I thought we were a terrific department. I always said we were the best department between Philadelphia and Durham. So it stuck right in there. So I was very proud of what we did.
Go back a little bit and talk to me about your relationship with Ron, because I think he's someone that you and I feel strongly about, but there's 3 decades of people that don't know him anymore.
Well, he was a terrific guy. We established a foundation soon after he died, and it's a group that awards prizes to the outstanding vitreoretinal fellows, and there's so many more being trained now that it's been honed down to the second-year surgical fellows in retina. The thing that's hard to convey to everybody was what a special guy he was. You just can't. You can read the papers and all this and that, but he just injected so much enthusiasm and so much fun. On a personal note, as I said, we had these courses, mini courses, and so we traveled literally around the world with my former wife and Alice and a couple of other couples, and just got to know each other very, very well.
And I think one of the things too I love is leaving the Michels Foundation and having that continue. I think it's been almost 34 years, and seeing those younger fellows.
Well, it really is. We're pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but very pleased. Sandy Brucker's done a great job of heading that up, and Karen Baranek is really the reason it's done so well. I know Ron would be very proud.
The ABO, which is our certification body, and then the Academy, which supports all of us, you go on to to play major roles in both. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
They both involve volunteerism and giving back to the various communities. the only way to get involved in these things is to begin at the ground level, at the grunt level, and I did both just because I wanted to stay in the main arena of ophthalmology. So I just kind of worked myself up in both organizations. And the board, I think, functions kind of the same way. You're an associate examiner for a few years. You get watched fairly closely, and then you become a senior examiner, and a lot of this is just timing. But the person who does what were then called props, there was an oral prop and a lot of visual props. You can find yourself running that segment of things, and then when you become a director, there are 8 directors, 2 sequential 4-year terms, and one of those, there are 2, a pair of people going through that segment, and one of you becomes the chair of the board in your last year, your 8th year, and I did that.
You sat on the FDA panel for drug and devices. I sit on that too. So, but when you look back, I remember taking a bottle of perfluorocarbon liquid from my lab into the OR. I mean, now I think I'd probably have to go to jail, but, can you comment on what that was like at the time?
Well, if nobody's listening, yeah, it was a difficult time because you go to a meeting and learn about a new technique, new special way to go, and silicone oil preceded the PFO stuff, and I can remember Ron Michels bringing a jug of silicone oil over to the country, and I got some of that, and things like that. Yeah, were definitely, nobody was watching very closely, but those things did happen.
Even things like the development of the air pumps and some of the experiences where trying to adapt a device to work. I think that our younger colleagues can't really appreciate where you could take something directly into the OR that hasn't been FDA approved. And
I feel very strongly about that. The ethical side to medicine that really demands you do the best thing, but the other side of the ethics question is, is it legal? And it's a difficult problem. It really is. I'm just glad it resolved as quickly as it did in terms of the perfluorocarbon liquids in particular that Stanley Chang developed.
And then Stanley with perfluorocarbon. I mean, one operation and a giant retinal tear, and you were done. A little bit like macular hole surgery.
Exactly.
This whole argument about does it work, does it not work? As soon as you, as a surgeon, did a case and closed a hole, it worked.
It was just unbelievable. It really was unbelievable. And you go to a meeting and watch one perfluorocarbon episode, and that's all it took.
It's funny because my younger fellows are like, well, where's the clinical trial? And I'm like, I appreciate a clinical trial, but here's the answer. You just saw it. You saw something that was impossible to do. So amazing time. I know you went back to Hopkins to get your master's in the history of medicine. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was a great experience, and it's the oldest department of history of medicine in the country, and I really enjoyed it. But it's evolved from doctors writing about old doctors and what they did to more interest in what are called social determinants, or the sociology of what happens to diseases, and from epidemics to the way things are managed. The fun, in a sense, thing was you had to usually write a paper every week or two, just a page or so. But to get it redlined back like your freshman English class, and then you meet the so-called reviewer, and she's younger than your daughter, and That was a really humbling experience, but I improved. As they all said, at least I improved.
Well, I think too, when you go back to an educational experience and you don't have to do it, you want to do it.
Hmm.
I kind of encourage some of the younger doctors, like think about an MBA or,
Yeah.
but I think that it's a totally different experience. And, I thought it was remarkable that you did that.
Well, it really was fun, and it was a lot more work than I thought it would be, and much different than I thought it would be. But the the sociology associated with the history of medicine is really gaining forefront.
I think that's interesting because, we're talking about one type of history of medicine,
Hmm.
which is more at that personal level. And there is that big focus now on societal medicine,
Yeah.
which is very different, even though we touch on that a little bit. So use your crystal ball for me and tell me what you think now and in the future you might feel most proud of.
Oh gosh, I'm proud of several things that I've done. But the leadership roles that I've had been very productive. I have not thought as much out of the box as I probably should have, but I think we did a lot of good, and particularly at the board and getting into the recertification, writing those questions, and going through that process with Dennis O'Day was really something and very memorable. I know we made a major contribution there that was not received well by uh, probably the majority of ophthalmologists, but it had to be done. I mean, you want your pilot to be recertified, and I think doctors should be recertified also.
I think that was a sort of a pivotal change in how we looked at certification at the
Yeah.
time, which is amazing. So that'll continue for sure. And I think you left your mark on the Retina Society, and then I loved the Michels Foundation again. I feel that's just going to really focus on principles of our profession that Ron exemplified, and that continues. So it's you've done a lot.
Well, thank you. I've been very lucky, as I've tried to emphasize. Uh, but I hope we can do more with the Michels Foundation in the future.
Dr. Wilkinson, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your story and really giving us an opportunity to be there with you with some of the most remarkable people besides yourself in our field.
Well, thank you, Tim. Again, it's a pleasure and honor to be here.